Have you ever saved a single dollar and thought, well, that doesn't really matter? Like, what's $1 going to do for my financial future? It's basically nothing, right? You work all day, earn a paycheck, and by the time you account for taxes and rent and food, putting away $5 feels pointless. Most people think that way. They assume wealth building requires these massive dramatic changes. As you need to earn a lot more money or inherit something or win the lottery. But here's what nobody tells you about how real wealth actually gets built. It's not about the size of the wins. It's about the consistency of the small ones. I spend way too much time thinking about money, human psychology, and why some people seem to naturally drift toward financial stability while others stay trapped in the same broke cycle their entire lives. If you're someone who's ever felt like the odds are stacked against you financially, or you've wondered if there's actually a path forward when you're starting from basically nothing, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it helps you see your situation differently. Because here's the thing that most people completely miss when they think about building wealth. Every single financial success story starts exactly the same way, with someone taking a small action, saving a few dollars, skipping one coffee, putting away $10 from a paycheck, something small enough that it barely registers as an accomplishment. But then something magical happens when you repeat that small action over and over again. It becomes a habit. And habits are where real change starts. Like, people spend way too much time looking for the one big breakthrough, the one massive win that's going to transform everything. They're waiting to get that huge promotion or the perfect investment opportunity or the business idea that's going to change their life. And while they're waiting, they're not doing anything with the money they actually have right now. They're not taking the small actions that compound over time into something genuinely transformative. The irony is that the people who actually build wealth are usually the ones who never waited for the perfect moment. They just started somewhere, anywhere, with whatever they had, and then they kept going. Before we dive into the specific mechanics of how small wins create big wealth, let me paint you a picture of what most people's financial situation actually looks like. You've probably heard statistics about how most Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Well, it's not just a saying. It's real, and it's devastating. The average person has less than 2 weeks of living expenses saved for emergencies. 2 weeks, which means that a single unexpected event, a car repair, a medical bill, a job loss, and suddenly they're in financial crisis. They're panicking about how they're going to pay for things. They're considering high-interest debt. They're reaching out to friends and family and feeling absolutely humiliated by their situation. This is the reality for millions of people right now. They're trapped in a cycle where every dollar earned becomes a dollar immediately spent because they have no safety net. But here's where it gets really interesting. That safety net doesn't need to be massive. You don't need $1 million to break free from this cycle. In fact, you don't even need 10,000. Sometimes all it takes is that first small win to shift your entire psychology about money. Research actually shows that having just $1,000 saved for emergencies creates a meaningful psychological shift in how people approach their finances. $1,000. That's a few months of discipline, maybe some extra side gigs, cutting out some unnecessary expenses. For most people, it's absolutely achievable. And once they hit it, something changes in their brain. They stop operating purely from fear and they start thinking about possibility. Now let me tell you something about human psychology that most financial advisors completely overlook. We don't actually build motivation from huge goals that are years away. Our brains don't work that way. We build momentum from small wins that we can see and feel right now. When you save your first $50 toward an emergency fund, you get this little boost of satisfaction. It's tiny, but it's real. Your brain releases a bit of dopamine, You feel like you accomplished something, and that feeling makes you want to do it again. So, the next week, you save another 50. Now, you've got 100. Now, the 100 feels like progress. Now, you're noticing other ways you could save money. Maybe you skip a streaming service. Maybe you meal prep instead of eating out. Each small choice leads to another small win. And each small win reinforces your identity as someone who's taking control of their finances. This is the opposite of how most people approach saving. They wait until January, decide they're going to save $500 a month starting immediately, they go nuts for 2 weeks, they get exhausted, they quit, and then they feel guilty for the rest of the year. It doesn't work because it's too aggressive and it doesn't align with how human motivation actually functions. But when you embrace small wins, when you celebrate that first $20 saved, when you acknowledge that first month where you didn't overspend on impulse purchases, that's when real change starts happening. You're building evidence that you can change. You're proving to yourself that you're capable of discipline. And that proof becomes the foundation for bigger and bigger changes. Here's where it gets genuinely fascinating from a mathematical perspective. Most people have no idea how powerful compound interest really is. Like they've heard the phrase before. They know Albert Einstein supposedly called it the eighth wonder of the world or something. But they don't actually internalize what that means for their finances. Let me show you. Say you decide to save just $50 a month, $50. That's basically $2 a day or one fancy coffee every few days. Nothing dramatic. You throw it in a boring investment account earning 7% annually, which is pretty conservative and historically accurate for the stock market. In the first year, you'll have about $600. Your return will be about $30. Not very exciting, but stick with me here. By year 5, you've got about $3,400. By year 10, you're at about $8,000. By year 15, you're around $13,500. And here's where it gets wild. By year 20, you're roughly at $19,500. But the magic is that your investment returns that year alone are nearly $2,000, more than you put in that entire year. Your $50 monthly contribution stayed exactly the same. But compound interest is doing the heavy lifting now. By year 30, you're around $40,000. That's just $50 a month. That's just small, consistent wins adding up. But here's the part that really matters beyond just the numbers. When you start seeing that money grow, even slowly, your entire mindset shifts. You stop thinking about money as something that just disappears from your paycheck. You start seeing it as a tool that works for you. You start understanding that time and discipline are basically interchangeable with money. The more time you give your money to grow, the less of your own money you need to contribute. And that realization changes how you make decisions about everything else in your life. Suddenly, that expensive coffee isn't just an expense. It's $3 you could put toward your future self. That restaurant meal isn't just a meal. It's money that could be growing in your investment account. This doesn't mean you never enjoy anything, but it means you're making conscious choices instead of just defaulting to whatever feels good in the moment. And people who make conscious financial choices, even small ones, end up in a completely different financial situation after 10 or 15 years than people who don't. The fascinating thing about small wins is how they create this psychological reinforcement loop that makes future wins even easier. When you save your first $100, you feel proud of yourself. That pride makes you want to keep the habit going. So, you save another 100. Now, you've got 200. That 200 sitting in a savings account becomes visible proof that you're capable of building something. It's not theoretical anymore. It's real. And suddenly that 200 becomes motivation to keep going. Maybe you realize you want to hit 500, then 000. Each milestone makes the next one seem more achievable because you've already done it before. You've proven it to yourself. This is why people who successfully build wealth almost always talk about the importance of getting that first win. Once you've saved your first grand, reaching the second grand is noticeably easier because you've already developed the habits and mindset. By the time you're working on your 5th or 6,000, it barely feels like a sacrifice anymore because you've rewired your brain around how you think about money. You've become someone who saves. It's not a temporary thing you're doing. It's part of your identity now. And identity is incredibly powerful in determining behavior. Think about the difference between someone who says, I'm trying to save money, versus someone who says, I'm a saver. Those are two completely different mindsets with completely different outcomes. The person who's trying will probably give up when it gets hard. The person who is will figure out how to make it work. And small wins are what create that identity shift. Every dollar you save is another piece of evidence that you're a financially responsible person. Every time you skip an unnecessary expense, you're reinforcing that identity, and your brain wants to act consistently with how you see yourself. So if you see yourself as someone who saves, you're going to keep saving even when it's difficult. Now let me tell you what actually changes in your life when you start accumulating these small wins consistently. First, your stress levels drop. This isn't metaphorical. Studies show that financial stress is one of the leading causes of anxiety and sleep problems. When you have absolutely no financial cushion, your nervous system is in constant alertness. But the moment you've got even a small emergency fund from those small wins, your cortisol levels decrease. You sleep better. You're less irritable. That matters. Second, your decision improves. When you're broke, you make terrible choices. You take bad jobs because you need immediate income. You stay in bad situations. But with money behind you, you can be selective. You can turn down bad opportunities. You can invest in education. Third, your confidence changes. When you have zero financial foundation, you're defensive and anxious. But with even modest savings, you stand taller. You negotiate better. You're not desperate. People sense this and respond accordingly, which often leads to better opportunities. Fourth, you start seeing possibilities instead of just threats. When you're paycheck to paycheck, every decision filters through survival. But with savings from small wins, you can think strategically. You can evaluate opportunities. This is why wealthy people seem to find more luck. It's not luck. It's that they have room to make good decisions and spot good opportunities. The broke person can't afford to evaluate. They just grab whatever comes. But here's something really important that I want to emphasize because I see so many people get this wrong. Small wins don't mean you're making dramatic sacrifices that make your life miserable. That's actually counterproductive. If saving money feels like constant deprivation, you'll burn out and then you'll quit. The whole point of small wins is that they're sustainable. You're not cutting your entire social life out. You're not eating beans and rice for a year. You're making slight adjustments. You're skipping one coffee a week instead of all of them. You're cooking at home 3 times a week instead of 5. You're looking for a cheaper phone plan instead of upgrading to the latest phone. These are minor changes that barely impact your quality of life, but they add up to real money over time. And because they're sustainable, you can keep doing them. And that consistency is what creates the magic. You're building a lifestyle that you can actually maintain, not an unsustainable crash diet approach to finance. I want to talk about something specific that happens when small wins start compounding. There's this point where your money starts working harder for you than you're working for it. And it's wild when you realize it's happened. Let's say you've got $5,000 saved and it's earning 7% annually. That means you're making about $350 a year from investment returns. $350 that you didn't have to work for. $350 that appeared just from letting your money sit in an investment account. Now, that might not sound like much, but think about what it means psychologically. You could work, I don't know, an extra week or two to make $350, or you could just let your money sit there. That's the power of compound interest starting to show itself. And as your savings grow from these small consistent wins, that passive income grows too. By the time you've got $20,000, you're making $1,400 a year in investment returns. By $50,000 it's $3,500. By $100,000 it's $7,000. At some point your investment returns exceed what you make at your job. That's when you realize you're actually going to be okay financially. Not because you hit some massive windfall, but because you made small consistent choices that compounded over time. That's the real power of small money wins. They don't feel dramatic in the moment. Each individual decision feels insignificant. But when you string together years of these small decisions, they fundamentally transform your financial reality. The challenge, and this is what most people struggle with, is that the most important small wins happen before you see any real results. You need to stay disciplined when your savings account is still tiny. You need to keep going when you've got $0 and it doesn't feel like it's doing anything yet. You need to maintain your habits when there's no evidence yet that they're going to work. That's where most people fail. They do the right things for a few months, see minimal progress, decide it's not working, and quit. But the people who end up wealthy are the ones who stuck with it through that boring phase, who kept making small wins even when it felt pointless. Who understood that this was a long-term game, not a sprint. And then by year 5 or 10 or 15, suddenly they're looking at actual wealth that they built one small decision at a time. Here's what I want you to understand about the compound effect of small wins. It's not just about money. It's about discipline. Every time you make a small financial win, you're not just building wealth. You're building the mental muscle of delayed gratification. You're proving to yourself that you can want something. Choose not to have it right now and be okay with that. That's one of the most valuable skills you can develop as a human being, and it spills over into every other area of your life. People who can delay gratification with money can usually delay gratification with other things, too. They're better at their jobs because they focus on long-term outcomes. They have better relationships because they're not always pursuing immediate emotional satisfaction. They take better care of their health because they understand that small daily habits compound. The small money wins aren't just creating wealth. They're creating a better version of you in every way. My actual advice. If you're looking at your bank account right now and feeling like you're too far behind to ever catch up, you're not. I promise you're not. The people who end up building serious wealth almost never start from a position of advantage. They start from exactly where you are, broke, stressed, wondering if it's even possible, and then they make the first small win. They save their first $50. They cut one unnecessary expense. They find one way to make a tiny bit more money, and then they do it again the next week and again the next month. And they keep going even when it feels pointless. And like in somewhere around year 3 or 5 or 7, they wake up and realize they've actually built something. They've got actual savings. They've got actual investments. They've got actual financial security. And it happened not because they got lucky or made some brilliant investment. It happened because they made small consistent wins and let them compound. That's it. That's the entire secret. There's no magic formula. There's no shortcut. It's just small wins, consistency, and time. And you have all three of those available to you right now. The small wins don't care how much money you have. You can start with $50. You can start with $5. The consistency doesn't require perfection. You don't need to be flawless. You just need to show up most of the time. And time is literally passing anyway. You're going to be 5 years older in 5 years regardless. The question is whether you're going to be 5 years older with significantly more financial security or 5 years older in exactly the same place you are now. I know which one I'd pick. So, here's what I want you to do. Pick one small win, just one. Maybe it's saving $20 a week. Maybe it's cutting one subscription you don't really use. Maybe it's cooking one extra meal at home instead of eating out. Pick something so small that it barely registers as a sacrifice and then commit to doing it for the next month. Not forever, just 1 month. After 30 days, assess how it went. Did you do it? How did it feel? Would you do it again? And if the answer is yes, great. Keep going. And maybe add one more small win. Maybe you save an extra $10 a week. Maybe you meal prep on Sundays. Maybe you negotiate a better rate on something you're already paying for. Each small win builds on the last one. Each one makes the next one easier. And before you know it, you've got this whole system of small wins that's creating momentum toward real financial security. That's how you go from where you are now to where you actually want to be. Not through some dramatic transformation, but through consistent small choices that compound over time. The compound interest of discipline. That's what actually creates wealth, and it's available to everyone, not just people who got lucky or born rich, just to people willing to make small consistent wins and give them time to work. So start now, not tomorrow, not next month, right now. Identify that first small win and commit to it for 30 days. Your future self will thank you for the decision you make today.